My mom and sister spent years trying to push me back into my ex's arms. But I married someone else. And now we're expecting a baby. The hardest battles are often fought behind closed doors. In the heart of what is supposed to be our safest place, the family. Sarah learned this the difficult way. Navigating through a maze of love, pressure, betrayal, and eventually, peace. What started as a seemingly innocent push by her mother and sister to bring her back to an old flame turned into a long, arduous journey that forever changed her relationship with her family. Buckle up for a story of resilience, introspection, and the struggle for one's own happiness in the face of relentless opposition. When Sarah was just 16, she fell in love with her best friend, Mark. It was the kind of love that seemed inevitable, two young souls, already so comfortable with one another, discovering a new depth to their relationship. It wasn't long before everyone around them, from friends to teachers, started to see them as a perfect match. For Sarah, Mark represented stability during the turbulence of adolescence. He was kind, thoughtful, and more importantly, someone she could trust. They dated all through high school. And after graduation, Mark proposed to Sarah, expecting their love to turn into a lifelong commitment. But Sarah wasn't ready. As much as she loved Mark, she felt that she had so much more of the world to explore. And there was a part of her that wasn't sure if the life she envisioned for herself included marrying her high school sweetheart right away. She declined his proposal, a decision that was met with shock and disbelief by her family. Her mother and sister, who had grown attached to Mark and the picture-perfect future they envisioned for Sarah, couldn't understand her choice. They begged her to reconsider, to think about a long engagement if nothing else. They were sure she'd eventually realize that Mark was the one. And all she needed was more time. Sarah's brother, David, seemed to understand her a little better. He wasn't thrilled about her decision, but he respected it. Her sister, Laura, however, took it personally. Laura had always been closer to Sarah, and she was deeply invested in her relationship with Mark. Things took a complicated turn when Laura began dating Mark's brother, which only deepened her emotional stake in Sarah's past relationship. Laura had always been a hopeless romantic, and in her mind, Sarah and Mark were destined for each other. To her, Sarah's refusal to settle down with Mark wasn't just a rejection of a romantic partner. It felt like a rejection of the life Laura had so carefully imagined for them all. As time went on, Laura began inviting Mark to family gatherings, holidays, birthdays, and even impromptu Sunday dinners. Sarah tried to be polite. After all, Mark and Laura had formed a close bond, and she knew that Mark deserved to have friends, even if their romantic relationship was over. But things escalated when Laura started trying to engineer accidental romantic encounters. She arranged for Sarah and Mark to share a room during family vacations and even went as far as inviting Mark to what was supposed to be a blind date for Sarah. It was exhausting. It wasn't just about Mark anymore. It was about her family refusing to accept that she was capable of making her own choices. Sarah, tired of the constant pressure, decided to set boundaries. She sat her parents down and explained the situation, urging them to help her keep Laura in check. Her parents tried, but it was clear that Laura had convinced them that she was only trying to do what was best for Sarah. In their eyes, Mark was a good man, and Laura's intentions were pure. They thought Sarah was simply being stubborn, so they only half-heartedly intervened. Things got a little better, but the damage was done. The relationship with her sister, once warm and close, turned cold. Her brother David distanced himself from the drama, while her mother hovered, always ready to ask Sarah to just give Mark another chance. Everything changed when Sarah went abroad for a semester. She met someone there, Alex, a student from another university. They clicked instantly. There was something about Alex that made Sarah feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. It wasn't that Mark wasn't a good man, he was. But Alex understood her, challenged her, and made her see the world through a new lens. Their relationship was exhilarating, and for the first time, Sarah felt like she was living her life on her own terms. When Sarah returned home, she introduced Alex to her family. Her father and brother were happy for her. Her mother was cautiously optimistic. But Laura refused to accept it. She kept insisting that Sarah was just in the honeymoon phase, and that her true love was still waiting for her, Mark. Laura's desperation became more evident with every passing month. She tried to set Alex up with one of her friends, appointing the friend as Alex's date, at family events, and even made Sarah her maid of honor. With the hopes that the bridal party, which included Mark, could rekindle some old flames. But Sarah was done playing along. It all came to a head when Laura organized a tea at their mother's house. A supposed effort to bring the family together to celebrate Sarah's pregnancy. When Sarah arrived, she found not just her mother and Laura, but Mark and his family as well. The entire scene felt like an ambush. Her mother, Laura, Mark, and even Laura's husband were all trying to convince her that she was making a mistake. They brought up her pregnancy, her future, and her true happiness. They even went as far as to suggest that Mark should be involved in her baby's life. Laura cried. Her mother read a letter she had written about how she wanted her daughters to be close again. And Mark sat there, looking at Sarah as if waiting for her to admit she had been wrong all these years. Sarah said nothing. She simply sat there until her brother David arrived to pick her up. He had gotten Sarah's message and rushed over. Furious at the family for what they had done, he helped her gather her things. And they left. In the car, Sarah finally let herself cry. She had held it together in the room, but now the tears flowed freely. David kept apologizing, saying he should have intervened sooner, that he shouldn't have let things get this far. He told her that their mother and sister were hysterical when he left, trying to explain that they were only doing what they thought was right. But David knew better now. He had seen the toll it took on Sarah, and he realized that there was no right in trying to control someone else's life. In the days that followed, Sarah made a decision. She reached out to a lawyer and had him draft a letter to her family, outlining that she would not tolerate any further interference. If her boundaries were crossed again, she would take legal action. It was a drastic step, but one that she felt was necessary to protect her own well-being and the well-being of her growing family. Her father understood and supported her, moving in with David temporarily to distance himself from the drama. Her mother, on the other hand, was inconsolable, believing that Sarah was being unreasonable. She still held on to the idea that Laura was just trying to help, that everything could be fixed if they could just talk it out. But Sarah knew better. She knew that peace would only come if she put herself and her family first. She had tried for years to appease her mother and sister, to make them understand her choices. And in the process, she had lost herself. She realized that she couldn't be the person they wanted her to be. She needed to be herself, to live her life authentically, without the constant pressure to conform to someone else's vision of happiness. Months passed, and Sarah gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. It was a joyous occasion, one that she shared with her husband, her father, David, and her closest friends. Laura, though she tried to reach out, was kept at a distance. Sarah had made her boundaries clear, and she wasn't willing to compromise them. Her mother, after a long period of silence, finally asked to meet. Sarah agreed, but only under strict conditions: therapy, clear boundaries, and a mutual understanding that Laura would not be involved in her life unless things drastically change. Sarah's mother reluctantly agreed. She wanted to be a part of her granddaughter's life, and she realized that if she wanted that, she needed to respect Sarah's wishes. They started attending therapy together, slowly rebuilding their relationship, one session at a time. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, moments when Sarah thought about walking away for good, but there were also moments of understanding, moments when her mother genuinely seemed to grasp the pain she had caused by not respecting Sarah's autonomy. As for Laura, she remained on the periphery. She told mutual acquaintances that Sarah's husband was the one keeping her away, that he was manipulative and controlling. But those who knew Sarah knew the truth. They knew the years of pressure, the emotional manipulation, and the lengths Laura had gone to in her attempts to push Sarah back into her old life. Eventually, the narrative lost its power, and Laura was left to come to terms with her own actions. The lesson that Sarah took from this experience was profound. She learned that sometimes, even the people who love us the most can be toxic for us. Love isn't always enough to justify staying in a relationship, whether it's romantic or familial. She learned that setting boundaries isn't an act of cruelty, it's an act of self-preservation. And most importantly, she learned that her happiness was worth fighting for, even if it meant losing relationships along the way. Today, Sarah and her family have found a new normal. Her relationship with her mother is slowly healing, though it will never be what it once was. Her father and brother are her pillars of support. always reminding her that they are proud of her strength. And Alex, her husband, remains her greatest ally, always standing by her side, always encouraging her to put herself first. Their daughter is growing up surrounded by love, and Sarah is determined to give her the kind of childhood she never had, a childhood where she feels supported, seen, and free to be whoever she wants to be. Sarah's journey was long and painful, but it was also one of growth and empowerment. She learned that her happiness was worth fighting for, and that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight with those closest to us. And through it all, she found her strength, her voice, and her path to peace. Aida for outing a man as a pedophile in front of his new wife after he made a comment about my miscarriage. The thing about family is that we often assume it means safety, comfort, and unconditional love. But what happens when that belief shatters, and the people you thought would protect you are the very ones tearing you apart? This is a story about betrayal, resilience, and the choices we make to reclaim our lives from the ashes of a seemingly unbreakable bond. It all began one winter morning, not too long after the new year had settled in. Emma, a woman who had always taken pride in her large and seemingly loving family, found herself caught in a nightmare she never anticipated. It was just a comment, a cruel, heartless comment, that started it all, made by a man she once trusted, who would now become the catalyst for an unraveling that no one in the family saw coming. His name was Ash, Emma's brother-in-law, and while their relationship had never been perfect, she never imagined him capable of the things she would eventually discover. The comment, made at a family gathering, was about her recent miscarriage, a deeply painful experience that Emma was still struggling to come to terms with. The words were meant to mock her pain, to cut her down in a way only someone with intimate knowledge of her vulnerability could. It wasn't just the insult, it was the cold, twisted smile that followed, a smile that said he enjoyed her suffering. Emma walked away that day, her heart pounding, her thoughts a blur of confusion and anger. She had always thought of herself as a peaceful person, someone who would rather avoid confrontation. But that moment sparked something inside her, something she could no longer ignore, a need to understand why Ash, someone who was supposed to be family, seemed determined to torment her, determined to get to the bottom of Ash's behavior. Emma began digging. She started by reaching out to other members of her family, trying to gauge if anyone else had noticed anything strange about him. The answers were vague. Most people shrugged it off, saying Ash had always been a bit odd, but harmless. Emma wasn't satisfied, though. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more sinister beneath the surface. Her suspicions were confirmed a few weeks later when she discovered something that made her stomach turn. Late one night, she went through some old security camera footage from a family event that had taken place at her house. She had installed the cameras a while back, mostly for security reasons, but she had never felt the need to check them until now. What she saw chilled her to the bone. There, in the grainy footage, was Ash, creeping into her room when no one else was around. He wasn't just snooping, he was urinating on her belongings. Emma paused the footage, her heart hammering as a wave of nausea washed over her. This wasn't just a matter of disrespect. It was a blatant act of malice, a deliberate attempt to hurt her in a deeply personal way. Emma made up her mind that very moment. She wouldn't let this slide. She wouldn't let Ash continue to torment her without consequence. But confronting him directly was out of the question. She didn't trust herself not to lose her temper. And frankly, she was terrified of what he might do if cornered. Instead, she decided to quietly move out of the house she shared with her husband Ted. Taking her cat and a few essential belongings with her, she went to stay with a friend while Ted, who was still finishing his studies, stayed behind to figure out what to do about Ash. Ted handled the confrontation. It wasn't a loud argument, nor did it result in the kind of dramatic fallout one might expect. Ted simply told Ash that they knew what he had done and that he needed to stay away. Ash, surprisingly, didn't deny it. He didn't apologize, either. He just smirked and left, as if he had expected it to end this way all along. From there, things began to spiral. Emma had hoped that by removing herself from the situation, she might be able to regain some sense of peace. But instead, the family dynamic only grew more toxic. Ash didn't keep quiet about what had happened. He began to spread lies about Emma, painting her as unstable, accusing her of fabricating stories to turn the family against him. The family, who had always been close-knit, began to splinter. Emma's mother-in-law, a woman who had always been kind to her, began to avoid her calls. Ted's brothers, who had been like her own siblings, stopped inviting her to family gatherings. The sense of isolation was unbearable. Emma found herself in a dark place, questioning not only her sanity but also whether she had made the right choice in exposing Ash. But then came a turning point. Ted, after weeks of grappling with his own feelings of guilt and helplessness, made a decision. He realized that the only way they could move forward was to cut ties with the toxic influences in their lives, even if it meant walking away from his own family. Ted and Emma sold their home, packed up their lives, and moved across the country, hoping that distance would finally bring them the peace they craved. In their new city, Ted and Emma began to rebuild. It wasn't easy. The weight of everything they had gone through still lingered, casting a shadow over their every decision. There were days when the grief of losing the family they had once cherished felt overwhelming. But slowly, they started to find a new rhythm. Emma began seeing a therapist, someone who helped her make sense of the chaos she had endured and who encouraged her to write about her experiences as a way of healing. Emma took that advice to heart, and she started sharing her story on Reddit. She didn't expect much from it, maybe a few comments, perhaps some words of support. But what she found was something she had lost hope of ever finding again: community. People from all over the world reached out, sharing their own experiences with toxic family members, offering advice, and, most importantly, letting her know that she wasn't alone. The story, which followers affectionately dubbed the P-Man Saga, quickly gained traction. Emma found herself at the center of a strange but comforting web of strangers who genuinely cared about her well-being. They were there for every update, every small victory, and every setback. They cheered her on when she finally decided to get a restraining order against Ash. They celebrated with her when she and Ted moved into a new apartment with bigger windows for their cat Tortilla to bask in the sunlight. They offered their heartfelt condolences when she shared that she and Ted had decided to separate, not because they didn't love each other, but because they both needed time to heal on their own. Emma's journey was far from over. There were still moments when the weight of everything she had lost felt unbearable. The family she had once loved was now little more than a painful memory. And the future she had envisioned with Ted was no longer within reach. But there was also hope that, with time, she could rebuild her life into something even more beautiful than before. And she did, slowly but surely. Emma began to find herself again. She found joy in the little things, like the way Tortilla would chase the sunlight across the apartment floor, or the satisfaction of a freshly steam-mopped floor, even if it did leave her socks damp sometimes. She started making new friends, people who knew nothing about her past and who accepted her for who she was in that moment. She found a new job that she loved, one that allowed her to channel her creativity and make a difference in the world. One of the most profound moments came when Emma realized that she no longer hated Ash. She still despised what he had done, and she would never forgive him for the pain he had caused. But she no longer allowed him to control her emotions. He was just a sad, broken man who had tried to bring her down to his level, and he had failed. Emma had risen above it, and in doing so, she had found a strength within herself that she never knew existed. Emma's story is one of resilience, courage, and the importance of setting boundaries with those who seek to harm us. It is a reminder that family is not always defined by blood, but by the people who choose to stand by us, even in our darkest moments. It teaches us that sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is walk away from the people who are supposed to love us when they prove themselves unworthy of that love. Emma's journey also highlights the power of community, even an unconventional one. Like Reddit, the kindness of strangers helped her find her voice again, and in sharing her story, she not only healed herself but also offered hope to others going through similar struggles. She learned that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a strength, and that by opening up about her pain, she was able to connect with others in a deeply meaningful way. In the end, Emma chose to live her life on her own terms. She chose joy, even in the face of loss. She chose to let go of the anger that had once consumed her and to focus instead on building a future filled with love, laughter, and the people who truly cared about her. And in doing so, she found the happiness she had been searching for all along. This story serves as a powerful reminder that, no matter how dark things may seem, there is always hope. There is always a way forward. even if it means taking a path you never expected. And sometimes, the most unexpected journeys lead us to exactly where we need to be. If you're going through something similar, know that you are not alone. There are people out there who care, who understand, and who are ready to help you pick up the pieces and start again. Emma's story may have started with betrayal, but it ended with triumph. And that is a journey worth telling. Again and again.